So you've always wanted an Aston Martin. Who wouldn't? You've always thought they were out of reach. Well, maybe not. Think again. The DB7 is just on the cusp. It's sort of about to go up in value, but currently can be quite affordable. You don't have to buy the best one in the world. I wouldn't recommend buying the worst one. You'll find a lot of information online about buying the DB7, and a lot of it is quite wrong. It's very obviously written by people who haven't owned the cars or lived with them for any length of time. I've had this one at home for quite a long time, and we've had it a while now, and I can tell you everything about what they're like to live with. So, what do you need to know?
But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So check the video description for full details and to enter.
You don't need to worry about the doors and the boot lid because they're plastic. And on the very early cars, the bonnet was plastic too, although they did change that because of problems with heat expansion and panel gaps. They can rot though. The car structure can rot pretty much like an XJS. Because it is an XJS, if you put these two cars up on a lift, the XJS and the DB7 side by side, they're absolutely identical underneath. Anywhere an XJS can rot, a DB7 can rot. Particular problems, the screen aperture or the screen sealing certainly, which tends to leak and make the car damp, and then you get rotten front footwells. And something else which contributes to the problem with the footwells is the door seal. Unfortunately, the door seal is specific to the Aston DB7. It's not a shared Jaguar part. And they're £600 each, brand new. You'll buy one used for 60 quid, but it may be the same as this one, which you can see has just split here. And in heavy rain, it will let water into the car. It pulls in the footwells, which are the lowest point. I mean, stupidly, the engine ECU is in the footwell, which wasn't a great piece of design thinking, but a lot of these cars have had a welding repair to the floor pan. Don't be surprised if you find it. It's just not unusual. It means someone's kept on top of it, I guess. Where else can they rot? Well, anywhere. Sills, suspension mounts, everything. You really need to look underneath one of these cars to check. And one thing they all seem to suffer from is rot around the rear screen. Sometimes it's on the side here, sometimes it's around the bottom, and this particular car's got a nasty bubble on the near side here. Bodywork is an Aston specific problem. Check it carefully. Bonus is that most of these cars have been cherished, so people have kept on top of them, because the one thing that people do like is their looks. People seem to prize them for their looks above all, these cars, and so you'll find a car that's even been neglected mechanically can look $1 million because the owners kept on top of the paintwork and the polishing. Engines, you've got two choices. You've got the mighty V12, or the earlier cars had the Jaguar-derived supercharged straight six. It's generally assumed that the Jaguar engine is bulletproof. It is a well-proven engine, but they're all getting on in years now, so you want to listen for a rattly timing chain, rumbling supercharger bearings, and you want to look for problems like head gaskets and cooling system issues as well. And you can also have a problem with the cooling system for the supercharger as well, for the intercooler. Do check that the inlet manifolds aren't cracked. It's not an easy thing to see. Ask the owner if they're cracked, or just listen and see if there's a problem. But the Aston Martin engine, which was designed by Ford for Aston Martin and then produced by Cosworth, that's another fallacy. People assume it was a Cosworth developed engine, and it wasn't. It can be absolutely fine. However, it might not, and if you get a bad one, walk away. The thing to listen for is what's known as the Aston Martin V12 tick. You'll find more information online if you simply search for that, but DB7 V12 and even the early DB9s can develop a problem where they end up with a piston slap, and you can hear a very distinctive tick evident from the top of the engine. Sounds like a slightly noisy pulley or an idler or something, and you'll think nothing of it, and you'll think, oh well, that's fine. You'll never discover it on a test drive, but the specialist advise holding the car at 2,000-3,000 RPM for 2 or 3 minutes, and then popping it up on a lift and listening from under the sump, and then you can hear the ticking. Sounds more like a hammering, and really, you don't want to buy a car that's got that problem, because at the moment I don't believe you can get exchange engines from Aston Martin, which means you're into a hand-built rebuild. Essentially, listen to the engine carefully, check that it's not misfiring. A common problem with V12 engines of all kinds is that they've got so many cylinders, it's not often easy to tell whether it's misfiring or not. So a good one will just pull and pull. I mean, they really do go well. Another problem with the V12, you can end up with the crankcase ventilation system causing all sorts of problems, and effectively you end up with it dripping oil onto the air filter, which then gets sucked into the engine, and when the CCV system works properly, you shouldn't get any oil smoke from the exhaust, but do ask to see the engine started from cold, and stand around the back of the car when he starts it from cold. If big clouds of smoke come out, it might be a good way to bargain the price down. It might simply be that you need to sort out the PCV system. The actual filter in the system is a Motorcraft Ford part. It's just a tenner or something, because it might be a huge, bigger problem. Use your own judgment there. Dip the oil, obviously, and check that it's not black and burned. And obviously, don't buy one of these cars without any kind of service history. It's a hard engine to work on at home. I think there's a lot on these cars that you can do for yourself, DIY, but really major engine repairs, I'd draw the line. Spark plug changes and things like that is absolutely fine. Transmission, surprisingly long-lived and robust. You've got two options, obviously, for both the 6-cylinder and the V12 cars. You've got a manual and an automatic. The automatic, it's a ZF 5-speed, but it's a bit slow in character unless you press it into sport mode, in which case it does fly. Not a lot goes wrong with it. I mean, problems are obvious, like it doesn't pull away properly, or the shifts flare, and it doesn't work properly. Manually shift it from D432 and hold the speed that way, and just see if the warning light comes on. Aston Martin designed it quite badly so that the warning lights are almost invisible for everything from indicators to oil pressure. You have to peer down like that, but just move it manually and switch it in and out of sport mode a couple of times just to see if it's working properly. You'll find that the kick down doesn't work unless you really mash the pedal into the carpet. There's a separate button on the floor and you need to trigger that before it takes off, but when it takes off on a dry road, it really will take off. Suspension-wise, it is almost identical to the Jaguar XJS, which is a good thing. It's a well-proven system. It's a little bit more boat-like than the XJS, I think. It's a harsher setup, but it feels more unwieldy. But anyway, it's an excellent setup. The famous Jaguar IRS there. It does mean there's a lot of bushes to consider. Major work at the rear end can get expensive, but they tend to drop the entire subframe like they do with the Jaguars and work on it and then pop it back up again. The front end, if it feels harsh and clunky, drop link bushes and things like that, there's a lot of bushes in the front end, and at the back end you've got the A-arm bushes that can cause movement. The front end is all adjustable, actually, the geometry on it, so you will find that they tend to track a little bit sometimes, and they generally pull to the left. All of the ones that I've driven that could do with an alignment all pull to the left. Don't expect it to be the most rigid car in the world. The whole body structure is a little bit flimsy, so going over speed bumps and cobbles and things like that, it's not necessarily the suspension that's at fault. The entire structure does tend to flex quite a lot. Brakes can get expensive. They're big old discs. The discs and pads can get expensive. Shop around though before you buy, and you don't have to break the bank. Problem you might come up with is the old gremlin of the ABS light coming on. It's a curious system, the ABS on these cars. It's essentially a hybrid of a Jaguar XJS system and a Jaguar S-type system. Wheel speed sensors are actually Jaguar S-type. Rather than the £100 Aston Martin one, you can buy them for £17 brand new. And the link wires which connect the wheel speed sensors to the wiring loom, they're another weak point, especially at the back where they tend to get damaged and chafed. They're an Aston specific part, old style Jaguar connector on one end and an S-type connector on the other end. But when they fail, you can either solder up the wire yourself and fix it, or you can buy a Jaguar part and simply graft the Aston connector on the internal end, or you can bite the bullet and buy the Aston part. To diagnose problems with the ABS system, you need a scanner. You don't need an Aston specific scanner, just a good diagnostic scanner that covers ABS will do. And if you tell it the car is a 1999 Jaguar S-type, it'll quite happily tell you where the problem is. Once you know what the problem is, you'll be able to get around it. And the module itself is shared with Jaguar S-type, Ford Crown Victoria, Lincoln Town Car and a few other randoms, but it's not normally the module that goes wrong. The Aston Martin people can put their hate mail in the comments for me, but the interior is slightly shambolic in its quality. I mean, if you've had old Alphas, you'll know where you are. It's the sort of car you're always going to hear a bit of a squeak or a rattle, or there's always going to be something slightly adrift. The good news is that the Ford switches and the Mazda handles and things that everybody laughed at when the car was new, they won't give you any trouble. They'll last the years quite happily. It's the Aston Martin bits, sadly, which won't last so well. The seats do tend to suffer with age. I mean, they're leather, they will suffer. These have been badly recoloured. You can do a much nicer job than this, and if you've got the patience and a spray gun at home, you can do a factory job if you get the right colour. Things like the wood veneered parts here, they do tend to warp and fail, and the veneer tends to flake off. But these are Aston Martin specific bits, and they're really expensive, even second hand. You do always have the option of sending them away to a specialist and having it re-veneered, but again, it's not cheap. Other problems you might get, the door locks and window regulators. They're another Aston specific part, and they can get really expensive. Column stalks are Jaguar parts, no problems there. Ford parts for the mirror controls and all the other systems. The big problem you might have, and this is another expensive Achilles heel of these cars, is the heating and air conditioning system. There are two blower fans in. They're actually XJS parts, but the Aston Martin price for the blowers is £1,000 each. If you can get a pair of XJS blowers to replace your grinding inoperative ones, then good. But if you can't, then you are looking at a costly repair. And the heater, no one understands how the heating works. You can read the section in the owner's manual 5 times and still not understand it. It's some kind of black magic. It's got a control setting AC. That doesn't mean air conditioning, that means automatic control. I'm sure the person who designed it understands how it works, but no one else. And the standard fit Alpine radio, well, it's nice to have the original stereo, isn't it, in a car that you buy, but frankly, it's not very good. It's a cassette-based system. It's not a lot of use for modern day use. So what do you pay for a DB7? Well, before we start on that, I would say buy the best you can find and not the best you can afford. If you're buying right at the limit of your budget, don't do it. You won't be able to afford to keep the car up to scratch and you won't enjoy it. Go and buy a nice XKR instead. But no one's going to do that, are they? You want a DB7, you've got the money, you're going to go and buy one. So generally, it's the i6 cars that are the cheaper. Somewhere around 18 will buy you a presentable 6-cylinder car that's been well looked after and looks nice, rising to 20 to sort of 23 as an entry-level point for the V12 cars. There doesn't seem to be much difference in price between the coupe and the convertible, the Volante. There will be people prepared to pay a premium for the manual car as well. But again, not everybody wants the manual, and you know, the automatic does suit the sort of grand touring nature of the car, especially the V12. And it really pays to shop around with these cars. You can find essentially the same car at vastly different prices. It's just that one owner thinks it's worth more because he loves it more. So do your homework, look at quite a few before you commit. Even if you're right at the bottom of the budget, I would say get the car inspected by an Aston Martin specialist who can put the car up on a lift and give you the benefit of their experience. And that's probably more important if you're buying one of the cheaper cars, to be quite honest. We all like to think we're competent home mechanics, but I would say don't buy a tatty car and think, oh, it's all Jaguar and Ford bits, I can fix it up cheaply at home. You might be able to, you probably can't. The problems you'll come up against are the Aston specific bits that suddenly cost an arm and a leg. And if a car's tatty, it means it's generally been neglected. It's unusual to find one of these that's been neglected, but when they're neglected, they really are trouble. Far better to buy one that has been looked after.